the essential service subsidising the world's most profitable banks, and Australia chooses madness over stability. Coming up on this week's Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report for the 25th of September 2025. I'm Elisa Barwick. Joining me today is Citizens Party Chairman Robert Barwick. Welcome, Robbie.
Thanks, Lisa.
And on today's show, we're going to talk about how the banks are getting out of providing the service that they're there to provide, and it's falling back onto Australian taxpayers and mums and dads. And then we're going to look at some of the pronouncements coming out of this week's events over in the US with the UN General Assembly, some of what Trump has had to say after that, and Mr Albanese, some of the madness, and we'll contrast it to some of the kinds of visionary future projects that Australia could be aligning with.
Yep.
Right, now please help us get the word out. Hit the like button, share the show, make a comment below, and please consider donating to the Citizens Party and our broad mission, and also joining us as a member. We are on a big membership drive, so if you're not already a member, sign up and you will receive every month, once a month, our magazine, the Australian Alert, where we provide a lot of the background information for the subjects we talk about on this show. Now, Robbie, you have an update on Dan Duggan before we get started?
Well, just a reminder update. It's we're approaching the 16th of October, which is when Dan Duggan's final hearing is scheduled. Dan Duggan has released a statement today thanking everybody who has supported him. I'll read out the message that I've received. Dan asked to pass on to everyone who's supporting him that he thanks them from the bottom of his heart, and that knowing the support we're giving and our prayers is greatly helping him cope with his current ordeal. He also expressed how humbling it is to know we all care. Now, and that's message came from Citizens Party supporter Terry Dwyer.
Very good.
Now, and if you're in Dan Duggan's position, right, you're just a guy who was going through life doing business. And last week, at least, we played the clip of a ABC News report in 2010 of Australia doing joint military exercises with China. And not only were we really thrilled that we were the first country China trusted to do joint military exercises with, America was lobbying us to get in on it as well. And that was the time when an Australian citizen, Dan Duggan, ex-American, because he's a skilled pilot, went to South Africa to train pilots, test pilots, some of which were Chinese. They were not military pilots, they were just Chinese pilots. And there was no overtones of any idea that China was the enemy or anything like that. And so 13 years later, they retrofit this idea in people's minds. And this poor guy who, unlike, say, people like David McBride and Julian Assange, who took on the system deliberately to try and find justice, and they paid massively for it. Unlike those guys, Dan Duggan was just going about his business,
Running a business, yeah.
And so, and because he's been caught between these geopolitical tectonic plates, he's been in jail for the last 3 years. Despite having not broken any Australian law, so
his family has suffered. You
can see how overwhelmed he would be at the support he has received. We've got a video. It's on the YouTube channel that Marcus Rubenstein produced, just introducing people to the general idea of Dan Duggan. So please take that and share that widely. It's also on Facebook and other things. But yeah, we're going to follow this one down to the wire. Also, Elisa, just breaking news on David McBride. Now, I might have the date wrong, so I apologise, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. The 9th of October, David McBride has been given leave for his next court appearance to appeal his sentence. All right. Remember, he was sentenced to 5 years and 7 months for revealing Australian war crimes in Afghanistan, because there's no act of whistleblowing that doesn't involve breaking a law, right? and he should not be in jail for that. But anyway, we'll cover that in future weeks. But keep an eye on that. And if you're in the Canberra vicinity, there are events in the court precinct there when these hearings are on. Please get along to them. There will be something on the 16th of October at the Dan Duggan hearing. If you're in the general vicinity around Canberra, please get along to support. And on the 9th of October, look up the details. I'm sure there'll be something there to support David McBride as well.
Very important. Right, first topic, the essential service subsidising the world's most profitable banks. So just to remind people, and of course the impact of this is horrendous, between this week and the coming 5 weeks, 22 communities are losing their last banking services remaining in town just from closures of one bank.
Yeah,
and it's
Bendigo.
not even one of the big four, it's Bendigo Bank. It's a wannabe big four.
Yeah.
And they're acting like the big four with these closures because they were not included in the moratorium that the government now claims credit for engineering, but they didn't have the foresight to include other banks other than the big four.
What I predict is when Bendigo Bank finishes this round of closures, the government will sign Bendigo Bank up to the moratorium and make a big
After the horse bolts.
how they've expanded the moratorium to include, because that's what they did with all the other banks in there. They let the banks do their closures first, and then they announced the moratorium. It's a charade.
Yes. Now, today is a very sad day because it's D-Day for Queenstown and the last remaining bank on the entire west coast of Tasmania. So that bank is closing at 1 p.m. today, and tomorrow the townspeople will hold a wake, and that is not going to be a giving up type of a wake of just resigning ourselves to no bank, we're burying the body and it's all over.
Well, they're mourning the loss of their bank, and they're doing it in a way to send a message to Bendigo Bank.
Yeah, they are sending a message.
There is nothing casual about losing your last bank in town.
Yes.
Nothing. And we've got some clips we can play in a minute, but one of the townspeople, Janet Lay, expresses this. But so for the people in the town, they're not casual, but the people at the bank, in Bendigo Bank and the other banks, they make these decisions very casually. Remember, Richard Fennell hasn't even bothered to visit this town.
Yeah, so we should play these 2 clips because finally there was some media coverage beyond a few, ABC radio and various other local media pieces. Sky News sent someone to Queenstown, so full credit for doing that, and did live crosses earlier this week. And we'll show 2 of the clips by this young journalist who did a very good job, actually.
Can I say something first before we do? Just on this is frustrating. So regular viewers of the show are probably used to by now that the Citizens Party, when we do campaigns and we cover it on our show, we don't change the subject. Like if we're on a campaign, we stick to it. We see it through, right? And so you'll know that we started talking about Queenstown back in July, right? We've been on this for more than 3 months now. And part of a campaign, when you do the kind of work that I do, you're putting out media releases, etc. You're desperately trying to get media coverage, not because I love the media, but because I know how pathetic the politicians are, that the only thing they ever take serious is something that's covered in the media, right? Yeah. So anyway, we've tried very hard. We've got some patches of it. This week, the last week, when all hope looks effectively lost, I mean, we'll see, but suddenly the media is really interested, and it's a long way to go to Queenstown. I went there, remember, right? So they're driving in from Hobart and Launceston and whatever to cover this story. So the Sky News one, but to credit to them, excellent job. Channel 7's there today.
Yeah.
Right, to cover they're going to cover the wake. And if they were there 6 weeks ago, we might have, I kid you not, if they had turned up like this 6 weeks ago, we might have saved the branch.
Yeah.
We might have forced the government to come out and say something about it. So that to me is personally frustrating. However, Aspen Blomfield has made up for it with the quality of this report. So we're going to play 2 clips. The first one was his first live cross on it. And what we love about this is the reference to King O'Malley.
Yep.
But also look for what Janet Lay says. And Janet Lay hats off to Janet Lay. The way this whole campaign came about, Elisa, is Dale Webster, the journalist who's documented. She's the expert on branch closures in Australia. She's been documenting them since she first put up articles on her news service, The Regional, in 2021, which is how we got to know her. Dale was covering the Bendigo story. She saw that Janet Leigh had started a petition. She contacted her. Janet replied to Dale on email, which Dale shared with me. I called Janet and she repeated over the phone. And from there, we began this really important collaboration. And Janet is one of those salt of the earth community members she's a leader of the town by virtue of the fact that she's taken responsibility to try and do something about this. Her motivation being her elderly mother, who just because she's elderly, still deserves to do banking, right? And losing the bank means they've got these ridiculous long trips. Anyway, enough of me. Let's play the first clip first because Aspen Blomfeld's summary of the overall issue is really good.
Branch on Tasmania's west coast is set to close this week. Bendigo Bank customers will have to travel hundreds of k's now just to do basic transactions. Aspen Blomfeld live in Queenstown, Tasmania, where the community is rallying against the closure, Aspen.
Yeah, that's certainly right, Kieran. People here are outraged. Queenstown was once a booming mining town with 6,000 people, 13 pubs and 4 banks. It's here where King O'Malley devised his plan for the Commonwealth Bank. Now, Bendigo Bank will shut its doors for good at Thursday on 1 p.m. That's the last remaining bank branch on Tasmania's west coast. Customers of Bendigo Bank, they'll have to do the 8-hour round trip to Hobart or the 4-hour round trip to Burnie on the state's northwest coast just to access in-person banking. Now, if people don't want to make that trip or they're otherwise unable to, they've got 2 options. They can use the local post office, although those services are somewhat limited, or the one ATM on the main street. However, that does charge a $5 transaction fee. Now, locals have organised a petition. It's attracted thousands of signatures. I spoke to the organiser of that petition. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Towns all across Australia, once they lose their last bank, die. People go away to do their banking, they then buy their groceries away, they cut their hair away, they go for meals away, they do everything else away. Our supermarkets will close. Everything will close.
Now, Bendigo Bank has provided me with a statement. Let's take a look at that now. It reads, following a review of evolving customer preferences, a reduction in business activity and an increase in costs, the bank has made the difficult decision to close the Queenstown branch. But Kieran, locals aren't giving up hope just yet. West Coast Wilderness Railway is the largest employer in the town and its general manager has sent out a message to the CEO of Bendigo Bank.
I would actually challenge Richard Fennell, the CEO of Bendigo Bank, to get on his plane with his marketing team and come down and market the hell out of turning this around. Flip the script and go Bendigo Bank backs the bush, backs Queenstown and backs regional Australia. They'll get huge returns for taking that sort of approach.
Kieran, it's just 3 more sleeps until this bank branch behind me closes its doors, and locals, well, they're not giving up just yet.
No, they're not. It's a beautiful part of Tassie, that's for sure. Aspen, stay warm.
Now that was, like I said, very impressive. King O'Malley, right? They get it. And that's, I can tell you now, that's credit to Janet Leigh as well, because Janet would have told,
Yeah.
we informed...
He didn't know that.
No, we informed Queenstown about King O'Malley. Our hero, we know more about King O'Malley than anyone else in Australia. The guy who created the Commonwealth Bank, he devised it there in that town. It's such a terrible irony that that town that gave us the greatest institution in Australian history before these bastards sold it off in the 90s, that town is now going to lose its last bank. And the next clip is reflective of this scandal that Dale Webster has unearthed, which is that Bendigo Bank, in making these decisions, appears to be operating off a secret blacklist that it has of mining towns. It has blacklisted mining towns around Australia. So we discussed this a bit last week. Dale Webster has written an explosive article about this. She documented exhaustively. She got on there with software and literally applied for over 1,000 loans, started the application process for over 1,000 loans, and they Now, this is quite important because Aspen's going to cover it, but and he confirms what Dale has said. But to know that the actual evidence comes from Bendigo Bank itself, because when it's turning down these loans, it says, we're not going to lend to you because of the suburb you live in. They use the word suburb even though they're talking about towns, and they name it, right? And the ones that there's the map, if you look at the map, we'll put up Dale's map. That map there shows you in red are all the towns that are getting turned down from anyone applying for a loan. And this was the first sign of for the people of Queenstown, by the way, that something was awry with their bank. Before Bendigo Bank announced it was closing the branch in July, for months before that, people couldn't get a loan, right? Even the mayor of the town couldn't get a loan.
Well, they were given extraordinary. They had to put forward a deposit to buy a home that was, I don't know, like over 50%.
And $120,000 deposit was demanded for a $170,000 home loan.
That's crazy.
Things like this, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so play the clip because essentially Sky News has confirmed Dale's work.
Residents in a small Tasmanian mining town claim Bendigo Bank is automatically knocking back their home loan applications. Aspen Blomfield is live in Queenstown for us. Aspen, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, good afternoon, Trudy. Just when you thought things couldn't get worse for this small mining town, Bendigo branch is set to close its in-person branch here in Queenstown, the last on the West Coast, this Thursday at 1 p.m, forcing customers to travel the 8-hour round trip to Hobart or 4 hours to Burnie on the state's northwest coast if they want to bank in person. Now, to add on to that, these roads are often closed due to wet weather. There's only 2 options in the town for those who can't make the trip. There's the local post office, although those services are somewhat limited. There's also an ATM, but that does charge a $5 transaction fee. Now, the local mayor, Shane Pitt, he's claiming that Bendigo Bank is automatically knocking back loan proposals in the town. He says if this is true, it would have a devastating impact on housing in the region. Let's take a listen.
We want to see more housing in our communities here on the West Coast, and if people can't get home loans to sustain that housing, what sort of a future have we got? We believe we've got a huge future and a very good one, but we need to be able to, these people, developers, to come in our community and build these houses.
Now, I've independently gone onto the Bendigo Bank website and tried applying for a home loan in several suburbs. I was rejected in Queenstown, Tasmania, but also Mount Isa in Queensland, Port Augusta in South Australia, Broken Hill in New South Wales and Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. Of course, these towns all have one thing in common: nearby mining activity. Compare that to the towns next to these suburbs, which were all eligible. Now, here is what Ian Robertson, the General Manager for West Coast Wilderness Railway, has to say about these allegations.
If that's true, then we're walking into where a bank morally decides who gets a loan. Especially if it's a mining community. Is that a green credential look or a lens like that that's on it? I mean, if the bank starts walking down that road, then that's morally corrupt.
Now, Bendigo Bank, Trudy, has provided me with a statement. Let's take a read of that now. It says, the bank assesses each customer credit application according to its policies, risk appetite and credit decision-making process. So they're not refuting these claims at all, Trudy.
Yeah, Aspen, great reporting. Good to shine a spotlight on just one of many regional towns that's suffering from a lack of banking. Thank you.
Okay, so it does seem a bit like, the media coming in, Channel 7 going in today are kind of circling the casket because it's a headline that they can make.
If it bleeds, it bleeds.
However, we can leverage this because there was, as I mentioned, 21 more communities about to lose their bank. Yarram in Victoria is one of them, and there's many more. Dale Webster's documented them all in case by case on her website, the regional. You can go and have a look if you want to know which the others are. But talking about the charade that you mentioned before, that the government is running, of which Daniel Molino claimed back in July when they put up the Pacific Banking Bill that, we've saved regional banking services, we're fighting for you, etc., etc. The other part of the charade is he claimed and the government claims oh, we've rescued Bank at Post. There were certain issues with Bank at Post, and now they're putting forward that that's going to be the big solution for small town banking, particularly as ANZ Bank, which was the one of the big four that wasn't signatory to this arrangement, is meant to be coming on board as of the 2nd of October.
Well, so this is hence the headline of this segment, because Australia Post is owned by the Australian people, and it is therefore a taxpayer asset, right? A public asset. And what the government has allowed is the banks to exploit it for their own purposes. And the number one reason the banks use is the number one justification the banks have when they want to close a branch is they say, oh, you can bank at Post.
Yeah.
Right? Now, so they tell people that, but then they put these conditions on it. So they put limitations on what you can do at Bank at Post. It's a glorified ATM where you actually get served over the counter.
But you get charged more.
You get higher fees than the ATMs, right? There's limits such as $2,000 withdrawal limits and things like that the banks have imposed, but they're not even uniform. Each bank imposes its own limits. It's a dog's breakfast. And they pay peanuts to be represented through post offices for the service. So if, now Christine Holgate was able to get the banks to pay some serious money back in 2017 when she was trying to, because Bank at Post, she tried to rescue the Bank at Post, she did rescue the Bank at Post service because there's 1,100 towns that don't have any banks at all, right? None. And so it is an essential service for them. But her solution was get the banks to pay properly for it. And she got them paying $22 million a year. And ANZ squealed so loudly about that it wouldn't come into it. But once they got rid of Christine Holgate, the banks screwed down what they pay for Bank at Post. But remember, every time they close a branch, each branch costs them, on average, $1 million a year to run. So they're paying something like maybe $15 million, more likely $10 million or $5 million to Australia Post, for Bank at Post. This is just the big four. And that is in lieu of them saving hundreds of millions on branches.
Yep.
Right? And the total amount, if you combine all banks in the last 10 years, it's something like $2 billion. There's 2,000 branches have closed. So something like $2 billion they've saved, telling people go bank at Post.
Yep.
And they're $2 billion a year recurring expense, right? And you can't get them to pay more than $10 or $15 million for that service. They are exploiting the taxpayer, or in other words, the taxpayer is subsidising them. Yeah. And these are the most profitable banks in the world.
Yeah, no wonder.
Right? Now, Elisa, this week, the Regional Banking Investment Alliance, which is a group of 21 small mutual banks. These are like they're all called banks now, but if you've been a customer of them long enough, you'll remember when they were called credit unions and building societies, etc. Right? They're all called banks now, but they're mutuals, which means they're owned by the members. They want to provide a service. They're in these communities providing a service. I spoke to the one who in the Northern Territory the other day who heads up what's called Traditional Credit Union up there, and he explained to me the branches that they provide, they're not profitable. They cover their costs, right? But they're not profitable, but they keep them open because the service is what's important. So they've come up with this proposal that apparently Treasury is looking at, that if the government orders the banks to pay a levy to the tune of $153 million, that to this Regional Banking Investment Alliance, that will subsidise, get this, the biggest expense for branches is staff. That will subsidise 5,000 staff. And in regional towns, like the smaller the town, the fewer the staff. So like you're talking, some branches have 3 staff, right? Others have 4 and 5. So you're talking minimum. The Regional Banking Investment Alliance has said that will be enough to keep open and to keep open currently and open more, a total of 1,000 branches. Something in that order, 1,000. They would go into places like Queenstown and set up a banking service for the people of Queenstown. If those big banks, now just remember the big four, not even include Bendigo, the big four between them, before tax, earn $40 billion a year in profit. Make $40 billion, they don't earn it, they gouge it. They make $40 billion a year in profit. $40 billion before tax. So you're talking about scraping off 150 million of that to subsidise these banks that want to provide a service, right, to do it in these towns. And you know the biggest problem that this Regional Banking Investment Alliance has? The banks want the government to just stick with Bank at Post instead.
Yep.
Because the amount of money they pay for that is maybe 40 or 50 million, and they can exploit the taxpayer, and the banks want that instead. Bank at Post is a blight on Australia, the way it's structured. Now, what the government should minimum, what the Regional Banking Investment Alliance is offering here is the minimum solution the government should be jumping at, right? What we're proposing is, what's our policy? We want a government bank. We want a government bank that uses the post office network as its retail arm, right? Kick the private banks out of it. Seriously, they should either provide branches in towns or bugger off.
Yeah.
The government bank uses the post office network, so not Bank at Post. Never confuse Bank at Post, what's there now, with what we're proposing. Clean all that out, have a government bank, and the government bank can take on these the big banks and force them to compete. And like the Bank of North Dakota, which is the only government bank in America, it plays a really important role supporting the local small banks. And that's why North Dakota has more community banks than any other state in America, right? And so this whole thing could work out very, very well. And these big operators, get rid of them. If they don't, and you know what will happen? They will come running back in.
Yes.
Right?
And this is where, you know, having a government bank has a much, much more transformative role than just saving local banking services. It has a transformational role in changing the economy itself. And this is something that, as you pointed to with the Bank of North Dakota, we've seen it with great examples like the Bank of Japan Post Bank, I should say. China does it now with their state banks. They understand in these examples, the people behind them, the governments have understood the power of banking to create credit. But if you leave it to the private sector, you're leaving those profit margins that can be put back into the development of a nation. You're just leaving it to those big CEOs that get their big fat paychecks and bonuses every year. And so going with a government bank is crucial for those reasons. And one of the examples of this, actually, which we pointed to in our Australian Alert this week, was Andrew Hastie pointing out the collapse of manufacturing in Australia, which, you know, comes back to banking actually, because Joe Hockey from his own party was the guy who essentially goaded the car industry to leave Australia, and that's in the sense of, you know, auto manufacturing.
Yeah, Hastie's pining that we lost the car industry. It was his party that got rid of it. Yeah.
And yet it was Joe Hockey who said the famous statement that governments should never be involved in banking, which is really what it comes down to, because when financial deregulation was introduced in Australia, and essentially the Campbell inquiry said there's to be no more public banking, and they stripped the powers of the Commonwealth Bank, eventually privatised it, financialisation set in where the private sector could profit from every transaction and beyond. The corruption grew out of that, as you've written here. And now we find ourselves in the situation today where you had these crimes by ANZ, the same crimes that were exposed and uncovered and were supposed to have been put down by the Royal Commission, and yet the head of our main banking regulator, APRA, Joe Longo, basically told a parliamentary hearing that going soft on crooked executives is how Australia does business.
Yep, and he was saying that as a justification. He said, no, everyone says, oh, when something goes wrong, everyone says sack all the executives. He said, that's not how we do it in Australia. we pamper these people.
Yeah, exactly.
Professor Andy Schmulo has gone to town on that, I can tell you, on a LinkedIn post. he said, should we apply that rule to pedophiles and rapists as well?
Yeah.
Right? That's not how we do things. There's the law. If you break the law, you need to have the book thrown at you. Oh, that's not how we do things in Australia. So so the two categories of criminal at the moment, we covered this last week a little bit. If you're a teenager breaking and entering, or a banker,
Yep.
you don't get touched. If you're anything in between, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But Elisa, back to Andrew Hastie, because you're right. So this is what we're proposing with the government bank is multifaceted. One is just provide a service that every town needs a bank, as Dale Webster said in her comment on her Mining Blacklist article. But what for? Because what does the bank do? The bank provides the credit, which is the lifeblood of the economy. And if you don't have those in all these towns, then there's no credit and they start to wither and die on the vine. But if you reverse that and you provide credit, which is investment, you can make these places boom. And so I say to Andrew Hastie, because I'm very cynical of, people might have seen it, we'll get we'll get Ben to put some footage as we're talking about him. He's posing with this 1969 Ford Falcon, right, getting all sentimental. Now, go back to look at because our show's been going for so long, and a call out to our current producer today is the stand-in guy who's the author of this show, Glenn Isherwood, came up with this idea of a show in 2010. So we've been going since 2010. You can go and look, if you've got enough time, with patience, scroll back through the video list to 2014 and look at what we were saying at the time about Joe Hockey telling the car industry to get lost, right? We were opposing it. Andrew Hastie wasn't. Yeah. We were. The Citizens Party was. Because we are the party of manufacturing, but it comes down to banking. Who's going to invest in it? What I think Andrew Hastie wants is a war manufacturing economy. So he's using the car, but this is the number one agitator for war with China in Australia, right? And he's just a mouthpiece for saying, let's bring back manufacturing of weapons. And I am sick to death of this obsession with weapons. Why can't we manufacture for peaceful purposes, right? We could be saving the steel industry by building a high-speed railway network around Australia and using Australian steel to do it. These are the sort of things we could be doing. No. We're going to spend $368 billion on submarines we're never going to get, and $12 billion is now being spent in Andrew Hastie's electorate of Mandurah. That's the sort of thing. So I'm very cynical about what he's saying. This whole thing's, and it's also a tilt at the leadership. If he's serious, start talking about a development bank, Andrew Hastie. You smash your party's ideological opposition to a government presence in banking, and I'll start taking you seriously. Because without that, it is rubbish. Every country in the world that's serious about manufacturing has government development banks, right? And what's the leading manufacturing economy in the world? China, and they have the biggest one. You mentioned Japan Post Bank. That was the source of Japan's post-war economic miracle, that investment into Japan's manufacturing. So that's the solution right there, and it'll solve everything else as well. It'll break the bank's models of real estate spending that is driving up house prices, right? It can go back to funding what we did after World War II with public housing. Yes. Because we funded that with
the Commonwealth
Bank, right? That's what you can do if you have this thing. But is anyone going to take on the banks who are dead set opposed to this? I doubt it. And one last thing before we move on. The new Assistant Treasurer, Daniel Molino, right? We swamped him with calls this week because of the Sky News coverage from Queenstown. Because this guy, you mentioned it before, he made a statement on the 24th of July claiming that his government has secured regional banking services. The same week, Bendigo Bank announced the closure of 28 agencies, and 3 weeks after they announced the closure of the 10 branches, including Queenstown. So we swamped his office. We just discovered this morning that he wasn't even in Australia when we were doing this. Now, his staff will pass on that they got swamped with calls. Where was he? He was over in the UK. And what was he doing in the UK? He's talking to the Lloyd's of London and the other British insurance companies about what they can do to help Australia make sure everyone can get insurance in Australia. Hello? The Tasmanian government is about to bring back a Tasmanian government insurance office. That's what you do. We used to have, it's almost as important as banking, we used to have government insurance offices in every state in this country. These guys in Canberra, they will go literally to the other side of the world to avoid taking direct government action on anything. So he's probably going to come up with some cockamamie scheme to subsidise Lloyd's of London to provide insurance in Humpty Doo in Northern Territory, rather than take the bull by the horns and say, no, the government's back, baby. We're in insurance, we're in banking, and you guys who have been exploiting the Australian, because there's 3 insurance companies in Australia. They're massively profitable. Their profits have been jumping up by 50% at a time, while people can't afford insurance. Right? You've got to break them. They'll still make their profits, but you make sure that the people of Australia get insurance, and that's the only solution.
Yes. Okay.
Enough said.
Next topic. Australia chooses madness over stability. So there's been, a big flurry of activity, diplomacy, discussions, probably not enough diplomacy and discussions, but certainly a lot of war talk and
keep talking.
And
I'm going to bring up Donald Trump.
In New York this week, and there were important discussions that were had regarding the two-state solution for Palestine, statehood for Palestine. Australia made a contribution to that, but meanwhile, as I think you mentioned last week, the UN had put out a report confirming that Israel is committing genocide, and basically for the last 2 years, as their report stated, all states around the world have been obliged to do everything within their power to block and prevent that genocide, which we have not done and other nations have not done, and what we're doing now is too little too late.
Yep.
But that's part of the general picture that we want to talk about here today of Australia's intense sycophancy to our Anglo-American allies. And what you're about to describe is what comes out of the mouths of these allies sometimes.
Well, it is increasingly it's increasing madness out of the White House, right? Trump gave a speech at the UN, just regurgitating, not every single word he said was wrong or anything, but I'll tell you what, the stuff he said on climate change, what's funny about that to me is this photo of Albanese desperately taking a selfie with Trump. Albanese will come back to Australia and he will sneer at anybody who dares to say, hang on, are you hyping up this climate change things a bit? But he's over there, these people should be embarrassed looking at that photo. Our Prime Minister stalked Donald Trump just to corner him and whip out his phone and say, can I get a selfie? Because he thinks that'll play well back here. Not to the majority. The majority of public opinion is against Trump. He's trying to suck up to this right-wing warmongering set because Albanese is personally a political coward, right? And so, when these guys, they're all moralistic about things like climate change. But if remember Donald, what's his name, Rudd, who's our ambassador now. Rudd in 2007 said climate change is the greatest moral challenge of the world. Well, then they should consider Donald Trump Hitler.
Yeah.
But instead
they're
kissing his butt, right? Okay, that's one thing. And then Trump goes and does this that makes him actually happy, because this is actual I'm going to read it out. Trump has just put out this statement about Ukraine. After getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russian military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not? Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have taken a real military power less than a week to win. Before I go on, I'll make the point that this is the second time Trump's been president, and the first time he presided over the last 4 years of the Afghanistan war that had been going for 20 years, right? And they do consider themselves a real military power, and they spent 20 years and $12 billion to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. Anyway, moving on. This is not distinguishing Russia. In fact, it is very much making them look like, quote, a paper tiger. When the people living in Moscow and all of the great cities, towns and districts all throughout Russia find out what is really going on with this war, the fact that it's almost impossible for them to get gasoline through the long lines that are being formed, and all the other things that are taking place in their war economy, where most of their money is being spent on fighting Ukraine, which has great spirit and only getting better, Ukraine would be able to take back their country in its original form and, who knows, maybe even go further than that. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and this is a time for Ukraine to act. In any event, I wish both countries well. We will continue to supply weapons to NATO for NATO to do what they want with them. Good luck to all. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. And he put that out just after meeting Zelensky. Now there's a Michael J. Fox movie with who's the great the guy who played the guy who played Spartacus in the 50s. People will remember who I'm talking about. Kirk Douglas. And Kirk Douglas is an old man, and he's going to die, and all the extended family have gathered because everyone wants to get in his good books, right? So he gets a bit of money, and everyone's trying to get his ear, right? So they can influence him, and the whole world is treating Donald Trump that way, right? Get his ear and get him to say something, because that's a recipe for permanent war, and is so wrong. Anyone who knows this story of how Russia has not wiped Ukraine off the map because it doesn't want to, right? It is trying to get a settlement here, and it offered. We got the quote from Zelensky in 2022. Zelensky said he said, people want us to do their fighting for them, right? And he wasn't that happy when he said it. And then he got bought off, and he's become the president of that position. And Donald Trump, if he believes a word of that, he is a certifiable lunatic. But unfortunately, that's Australia's position as well. We believe that. And we are aligning ourselves with a side of the world that is just going to get us into, trap us in a permanent war in Russia. And if they can, start the same thing with China, which we're the proxy.
Yes, exactly. And there's a lot more that could be said, but we'll skip forward to providing the contrast, because speaking of China, and we've had Mr. Albanese up in the Pacific Islands and knocked back twice in 2 weeks for deals on defence and security and economic cooperation.
We've gone to these islands, Elisa, Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu. We said, we've got a deal for you. Yeah. Here's all this, here's this money or whatever, but you have to give us a veto over your foreign policy, right? And these countries, they have more self-respect than we do. We've given America a veto over our foreign policy. They're not going to. We are the
so you've got to do the same to us.
He's not even representing us when he's doing it. This is us being America's deputy sheriff, because the veto is so they don't do deals with China, right? And both these countries, good on you, Vanuatu, good on you, Papua New Guinea, said, no, mate, we're not doing that. You don't get to say who we do deals with.
No, exactly. And then you look at why they're attracted to what the BRICS and similar arrangements like the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation that met recently, and all of these networks are expanding with partners and collaborators. You can see why it's attractive in opposition as opposed compared with that, what's being offered from Australia. And for instance, there's been meetings that have taken place. A virtual BRICS summit happened on the 8th of September because the BRICS countries under Brazil's leadership wanted to discuss how to respond in a unified fashion to Trump's tariffs, for instance. And so those countries have, come up with various ideas, and of course the main idea is to consolidate a new financial architecture where they don't have to be locked in to the US dollar order, but they can still transact, they can still trade amongst themselves, they can expand that cooperation. And many of the leaders that were at that summit, including people like the president of Iran, who sounded positively sensible compared to that Trump rant, and it was sensible. They called for the consolidation of independent payment systems, and this is not targeted at the dollar. It's not designed to destroy the dollar, as Trump has said, but it's designed to have alternative means of being able to continue to operate. And a number of these leaders in that forum and since then have been discussing strengthening their manufacturing, strengthening their internal economies so that they can improve their self-sufficiency. Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, just launched a big maritime project initiative worth over $40 billion. And he said, look, India must not remain at the mercy of others. Our only enemy is the dependence on other countries. The Russian Prime Minister, Mikhail Mishustin, made similar statements as he announced a high-speed rail project of over 4,500 kilometres connecting a whole heap of Russian cities, including into Europe and other places. And this is ultra-fast highways, upgrading of other roads and rail arteries, high-speed rail, which they're developing the trains. They've been designed and will be built all domestically, which is one of the benefits of...
Because of the sanctions, they have no choice.
Exactly.
But it gives them an ability to develop really fast technology.
And, you know, he specified, Mishustin, that this will enable Russia to ensure what he called technological sovereignty. And you can read in our Australian Alert various other examples of great projects being built across China, across Africa. These are the global south countries that are actually putting credit into development while the rest of us wither and die. And I just wanted to highlight what our Prime Minister, in contrast to that, had to say. This was at a Invest in a Future Made in Australia event.
Here it comes.
I mean, made in Australia, you think, oh, okay,
Sounds
that
good.
could be good.
Yeah, that's
But
good.
first of all, it was held and hosted by Macquarie Group in New York, Macquarie
yep.
Bank. And, you know, it was just this snivelling suck up to the United States, where he literally, I mean, he said, you know, United States of America has been the proving ground for Australian entrepreneurs, innovators and creators. We couldn't have done it without you guys. And then he goes on to praise the biggest names in America, which are expanding their footprint in Australia: Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Pfizer, and other healthcare outfits, Chevron, Exxon, Lockheed Martin, and others, along with your biggest investment and private equity funds. Yeah, the ones that stripped the Northern Beaches Hospital, for instance, and looted our aged care system and left people to die. He said, all of this is he didn't say that. He said, all of this is a success story worth celebrating. And then he goes on to brag about how we're the world's largest producer of lithium. We've got the largest global reserves of zinc and nickel. We're home to some of the most valuable deposits of critical minerals on Earth, you know, and ramped it up, light and
not for
heavy
us.
rare earths. You know, yeah, we're open for business, but for you to come and take it all.
Come and exploit us.
And proof of which is that he went on a little later to say over the next decade, total investment in the US from Australian pension funds, meaning superannuation, is expected to more than double. So, you know, that's the kind of madness that we're facing.
And Elisa, one of the things that our party has done a lot over decades is a lot of history research. So I would say we know more about the history of the Labor Party than the people in the Labor Party now.
Yeah.
And the true greats of Australian political history were from the Labor Party, right? King O'Malley we've mentioned, John Curtin, Ben Chifley, Frank Anstey. When for Albanese to talk like that is emblematic of the fact this is a party that's lost its soul. They are nothing like that. And I used to, back in the early 90s, I talked to old timers who were in the Whitlam government in the 70s, people like Clyde Cameron and Jim Cairns, and they saw the changes that were already coming, and they were going, no, this is not what the Labor Party was. And I saw when he gave his press conference in New York after this event, or at this event essentially that you've just described, he was asked by the press something to the effect of, you know, how can you know this is a success? And you know, his actual answer was, well, look who's here. And he rattled off these names, and he started with Goldman Sachs, etc. Right? Their presence proved it was a success. That's like he's just put out the feeding trough, right? And the biggest pigs have come to feed at the trough that the government has put out for them, and that's his proof that this is some kind of success. They don't believe in Australian sovereignty. They've sold us down the river, and long term, if we keep going in this direction, and look, you know, if you ever see it on a map, there's maps you can see. Maybe our producer will get it up in time, but where you're talking about you take the countries that are sort of in lockstep with the Americans and British and Europeans. It's Europe and it's North America and it's Australia and New Zealand down the other corner, right? And the rest of the world is literally the rest of the world is working and collaborating with the BRICS on a perspective of real economic development, powered by investment banks, right? Development banks that are either multilateral ones like the BRICS New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or national ones like China's banks and like what we need in Australia.
Yes. All right, so do contact us for more information, for a copy of the Australian Alert, and join us as a member. Get involved in the fight. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Elisa.
See you again next week.
Authorised by Robert Barwick, Citizens Party, Melbourne.